Check, check, check. Check, check. All right, what is up? I'm just deciding to just do a quick little stream. So what I'm gonna plan to do is I have a couple portfolios that a few students have sent me, and I reviewed a lot of portfolios, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to just kind of just give a quick look through these. I haven't really looked at them too much beforehand, so essentially looking at them fresh and to just give feedbacks on my initial thoughts. A little bit about my background. I've been in the interior design industry commercially for just over 5 years now, and I've worked at some of the, I guess you would say, biggest firms in Seattle location. I'll kind of be giving this feedback to just, I guess, help with some of the things that I've heard that the people reviewing me have looked for, and I've also done a decent amount of portfolio reviews, like in person, just kind of at events. I've had colleges sort of bring me out to do some portfolio reviews, to, I guess, to have some advice. And yeah, just gonna kind of go through these fresh, and hopefully I'm able to provide some good insight. I'm also still getting used to this whole like live thing, so I guess cut me a little bit of slack on that too. Normally I kind of prepare these videos a lot more in advance, but I wanted to really make it feel like authentic, so I figured live is the best way to do it. So let's start with this one actually. Just gonna go full screen. All right. So right off the bat, the first thing I noticed is that they have the years in which their portfolio was done. That's kind of, that can be, I leave that to like the discretion of the person doing it. Me personally, I don't like to put the date. I wouldn't put the date on the front of the portfolio just because I would hope that the work in it is timeless and I wouldn't want to like date it. So if I needed to use this portfolio in the year 2026, hopefully some of the work is still valid, and then that's just like one less thing that I would have to change. But I would put the timeline duration on the projects, but I don't know if she's done that yet, so we'll see once we get to it. The other thing is the cover page. It's a nice elevation, but it's not really a true elevation, and it's not really a graphic either. So one thing that I probably would have done is for this was maybe have like a render or kind of like a more eye-catchy like an eye-catchy like image, or either add a lot more color to this to make it feel a little bit more like personalized, because right now it just feels a little bit, I guess, like stark. Let me just go to the next page. Table of contents. I imagine that this is supposed to read, hold on, why is this not? Okay, I don't know what's going on with this full screen. Okay, I guess it's just not gonna work. All right, I guess we'll just do it like this. Okay, yeah, so a table of contents, professional works. The other thing with this table of contents is, if this isn't the pages, I would have the pages that each of these projects is on in the table of contents, and then also adding in page numbers would also be something that's helpful. And also utilizing every page. Like, I think even though this is a table of contents, it is still like another canvas that you could use to add more of your like work. So I think that would be nice. And then getting into professional works. I'm also gonna, I guess, look at this as if I had been looking at lots of different portfolios on this very day. So whenever you're putting together a portfolio, you can't really expect that the person looking at it will fully look and comb through every single paragraph and sentence on the page to be able to get an understanding of it. That may be something that's done like later once they've sort of like narrowed down the candidates that they'd like to hire or interview with. But for the general first screen, you kind of want to just have it be able to speak for itself really quick. So somebody that just wanted to scroll through this with the quickness could do so. It's portfolio, professional works, residential renovations, 2024 Photoshop, InDesign. So it is good that they put, the programs that they use for it. That's nice. Photographs for social media content. I don't know if that was needed. Okay, dividend. During my internship, I gained hands-on experience with materials, colors, and FF&E by sourcing materials, organizing the library, and developing FF&E package for science selection. Seeing these elements come together in the final photo shoot highlighted the importance. Okay, so this is actually a real project they did, and they were able to get actual photographs of the space. That's pretty cool. But since they were actually able to get real photos, this is also something I would have made bigger. I'm more of a fan of adding bigger images and less text and less light, and just really letting the renders kind of like carry it, just because going back to that point where if somebody's like flipping through this, it's a whole lot easier to just get an idea of the project from the images rather than having to like read the text and zoom in and things like that. You also don't know how they're going to be looking at it. Like if it's on a computer, you can zoom in, but if it's something that's, printed, some things may be hard to see. So I just like to make sure my images and renders will be nice, big, and legible. Okay, and I got some material project palette. This is good to have, but I might have just curated the images a little bit better. I think this one looks kind of nice, but it's a cut off. Kind of some of the materials on it aren't perfectly aligned and folded. And also, another thing I'll do is I'll Photoshop out the names of the textile, just because that can be like a little bit distracting. But I think this one looks okay. They probably just, I would imagine, just took the photo like with their phone, which is good nowadays. But when doing that in Photoshop, you just want to make sure, like in this image, how if you can't get directly above it looking down, it kind of adds these like perspective lines, and you can fix that in Photoshop. But yeah, it's just one thing that you kind of want to look out for. It's just like really the minor details. But again, if this was their final choice, I probably just would have curated it a little bit better, and really only put the final choice in materials, so they don't have to look for which one says the final choice. And then that way too, like if there are renderings coming up or the actual photos, it's a little less confusing to see what went where. Okay, and then Photoshop renderings. These are nice. One thing that I'll normally do with these is just add in a little scale figure. It could be off to the side if you don't want to ruin the elevation. If it's more than one of these sort of more illustrative elevations, then I would add a person. But for real elevations, like the actual elevations, yeah, no people in those. And they're usually just black and white and line drawings and no shading. And the other thing too is that since these aren't necessarily true elevation drawings, I don't know if they would need these dimensions, because it's not really a dimension elevation. Because if it was, there would be a lot more dimensions on everything. So if it's these more illustrative ones, I just would leave it as illustrative instead of adding in the measurements for this, because it's not real elevations. And again, for something like this, I probably would put in the project timeline, so that way you'll know how long it took them to produce, how long it took you to like produce your work. So I think that would be good to add. Again, it's good to have Revit, Inkscape, Photoshop, hand sketching. That's good. And same feedback. I would have kind of switched up their main layout and just having some of their renders be bigger so it can really pull you in and be a lot more immersive. And then it says region inspired by the location's culture and landmark, the Golden Temple. So hopefully there's a like inspiration page that shows what was inspired by what and the meaning of, I guess, what led them to their selections and why does it look like this, since they clearly state right here that it's inspired by something. So yeah, this is nice. It has some of those images. Talk about a little bit about the concept in bold letters, so you know exactly where to look. That's nice. And then some hand sketching that shows a little bit about the process. So I guess it does show to help like how they got to their final answer. Since these aren't actual plans and there's no sitemap, I don't know how helpful it is to have a north arrow. I think that's just adding space that just doesn't need to be there. Having not to scale or NTS, that could be good. But again, I don't know if anybody would assume that since this is a portfolio that they would be to scale. I would put not to scale if it was like a presentation for a client, but in a portfolio, I would just leave this blank because I think it would be assumed that what you're seeing isn't to scale, because anybody who's looking at this would know that that would be the case. So I'm all about like simplifying, like nice and simple, easy to read portfolio, just so you can really comb through it fast and see if it's good or not. Okay, so this is supposed to be their view icon. I think it looks a little bit wonky. I might have had like a key or something that makes it a little bit clear. I usually draw them something like this, where it's more so like a circle. Oh, that's pretty thick. But anyways, it's usually like a dot, and then in like another color, like yellow or something. I'll kind of like do that. So it just looks a little bit better. This one's kind of like weird because it's not like exactly a perfect arrow. And usually from what I've noticed, the floor plans usually don't get studied too deep, just quick enough to sort of just look like things kind of like look like they work. Which I think for the most part, this one does. Like, I mean, I'm sure if I like really scrutinized it and thought about it, I would find things, but just off a first glance, I think everything looks good. Walls are post shade. Furniture looks nice and simplified. I don't know if this is intentional, but these like red dots, I would probably like take those dots out of these coffee tables. Are they coffee tables? Yeah. I guess it's those plants. It's those plants that are showing up in the plan. So I just would have made sure I just put that on a layer that hides all that stuff. I'm not sure if these are supposed to be columns, but I just would have cleaned up that a little bit as well. But I think everything else looks pretty standard, so I think that's okay. All in all, I think the render, I think it looks good. You know, considering that these are students and not professional renders, um, I think it looks okay. I mean, I would have cleaned up this wall here and just make that like red, assuming that's supposed to be the same paint color as this wall. Looks like there's a little bit of that this needed to just be extended a little bit. So just like maybe just minor things to clean up. But all in all, I think it's okay. And also don't know if they needed this key because it is so straightforward. I just would have just had a bigger render and maybe even a smaller floor plan. And I'm not sure what's going on here. But these two things seem a little bit maybe unnecessary, or either I would have just made this like smaller somewhere in the corner. You know, same notes apply, I'd say, for this page. The render looks good. Looks like I just photoshopped in some light and just kind of added in light source that way and via Photoshop. But I think that's okay. Yes, floor plans. Just kind of digesting it a little bit. So I'm noticing that they do have pages. I thought there might not have been pages looking at the table of contents earlier, but that is nice that they have it. And again, maybe some cleanup. I can't zoom in because of the quality, but it looks like there's these like gray things that I might have gotten rid of. They could have also added a key, maybe to show you like which rooms are color coded. Like if these rooms are a certain type, and just sort of like color coding it if they're going to call out that there's a certain number of each type of room, just so you know what type of room that you're looking at faster. So if say that these are the, you know, twin rooms, have those be, you know, blue with a transparency on top of it, and then just have like a blue square next to this. So you can look at it and see like, okay, this plan is the one that has 48 copies. Yeah, these renders look a lot better. Yeah, it looks nice. The window's a little blown out, but that's okay. Maybe just adding in a person, putting something on the TV. Is this a floating flower? I can't tell if that's a floating flower, but confirming if it is or isn't. Okay, we got a new project. Going on to the next one. SketchUp, Inkscape. Okay, so it looks like they just kind of have the same, which is good, you know, having the same scheme and how you introduce and talk about your projects throughout each one is nice. But I just think the layout should have maybe been a little bit different. You know, showing some process. I guess this is how you move through the space. That's nice. One thing on this, I might have just put little spots where you stop. If there are spaces where you are expected to stop, I might have just indicated those. And then also having like a key, that shows, blue is egress and whatever color is, okay, stop zone, something like that, like area of interest. Aside from just having it in text, I might have just done it in diagrammatically. And instead of just putting wall and then photo, I might have called out the material. This is like a plaster or something like that. Or terrazzo flooring. I might have just added it just so they know exactly what it is. Okay, elevations are nice. Again, I would have made everything bigger. Seems like their actual like created work is it's too small. There's a lot of white, and I just think their work could have been bigger since they put so much time into it. Scale figure. A lot of people like these ghosted sort of figures. I'm not the hugest fan, but I think that's just more of a personal preference whether some people like them or not. Also not sure what these little pieces are, but the first thing that somebody's looking at is going to think is, can they be kicked? Or somebody going to like bump into them or trip over them? So I may have like taken those out. In our interior design brain, we basically just try to think, what can people trip over or break? And that's usually the first thing that people are like looking for when they're looking at your work. So yeah, this is a really nice render. Like the little teacups. Streets on. So, okay, so the story is in the photographs. So for something like this, if they're gonna have like a concept statement underneath, I might have done like a different render that's maybe a little bit like closer zoomed in, kind of like an artsy shot of some of these like photos like within the space. I think that was just another opportunity here that could have been done with the render. Like once you have everything set up and rendered, it's easy to get multiple angles. So since they've already gone through this work, I would just try to think of different ways to showcase it instead of just having one render. And this right here, I'm guessing this is some of their process work. I personally like to do things digitally, just so you can put it into your portfolio in high quality and not have to worry about stuff like this, like scanning it or taking photos of it happening. But I do know a lot of professors emphasize sort of the hand drawn and hand writing approach. So if you are going to do that, just make sure that you take care of your process so you can scan it cleaner, so you don't have these like lines in it. Because of this, I might not have even added it, just because it doesn't look as clean as all the other graphics on the page, and your eye kind of immediately goes to this instead of everything else. So if you are going to add hand-drawn work, make sure you scan it early before it gets messed up, even maybe in intervals, so if it does get messed up, at least you've got something that you can use. Or either just don't use it at all, or think about maybe doing it digitally next time so you don't end up in this situation. First thing I noticed with these plans is that they've used their plans from looks like their print set. So if I'm gonna use different plans, I just would have made sure that I set up like a different viewing template where it hides in all these like sheet numbers, because that's a little bit distracting. You don't really need it. And just making sure that however you do your floor plans are consistent. So like in the other one where they had their floor plan, they had the pochade walls, like where the walls are just all black. And on this one, it's having the pattern, the concrete pattern. So I just to make sure that's consistent, and when it out, just poche it out, you know. So that's what I would do. And just cleaning up some of these like little graphics. But it is good having turn-in radius just to show that you thought about it. Just make sure it actually works. And if you're gonna have a text that leaves that can't fit like within the space, just make sure there's a line sort of pointing to it. Kind of like one of these little things where it's just a straight line with a dot on the end or something like that. Could be nice. And they got the renderings. These look nice. Got the little fire over here. The renderings actually look really nice, but for some reason, I guess the angles seem a little bit weird. One thing that I like to do with my renderings is make sure that, what is it called? Parallax, maybe? Something like that. I forget the exact word for it, but you essentially want to make sure that you're, can't draw straight lines apparently, but you just want to make sure that your lines are nice and vertical and there's no like perspective warping going on. So that's one thing you want to look out for. This door looks a little bit wonky. It looks maybe too bright. I might have done this image in 2 exposures and then photoshopped out, or you know, did like a an ID mask so you can select these parts and just kind of like darken that, just because my eyes like immediately go into like all these like bright spots. I just would have mitigated that. Maybe added a person. This is kind of a interesting feature here. Just taking that out. I'm not sure if it has a, maybe there's a purpose. And I really don't know if all this stuff is needed. Like instead of having an image of the things that I've added, I just would have made this image bigger and just showed a render that shows it all, or showed multiple angles in lieu of just having these. If you want to keep the elevations, that's fine, but I think I might have just made the render bigger and just add another angle. You know, maybe taking off north arrow and stuff like that. And just making this a little bit smaller and just having like NTS or something just here. Or not to scale, just smaller. Other orgs. These are nice. But again, I just think that they should have been bigger because some of these look pretty cool. I really like these their marker sketches. The other thing too, I guess this looks like we're at the end. On this last page, I might have done like a hero shot just like it's something that they're like really proud of, just to kind of put the nail into their work. And then also maybe a resume might not hurt, like inside of the portfolio. So if somebody's looking at this online, everything's all in one place. They don't have to open the other document for the resume. The other thing too I want to check for is that there's not a lot of background on who she is as a person. And I think that's kind of like a really missed opportunity. Like something like an About Me section that just shows like a little bit of their background. So the people that are interviewing you, they're want to know that you have good work, but they also want to know that you're somebody that's good to work with. So I think that's one of the things that they actually do read is your About Me section, just making sure that y'all actually that you seem like a good fit and like for their, for the company. So I think that's something that could have been added. And then aside from sort of their other work, so I might have emphasized this little section a lot more because in addition to seeing like who you are and will you connect with their company, they want to know that like what are your other passions? Like what is it that you're passionate about? And I think this portfolio doesn't really emphasize that, like whether it's like, it can be something that's in the design field and that's fine. And it can also be something that's not in the design field and that's fine too. But I think just adding in more like personality. It's like if there was like an emphasis on sustainability, maybe just having like a page dedicated to that and showing like how much they're passionate about that. Or, if it's something like swimming, having like a section, maybe followed up in the About Me section or something, or on the last page to just sort of show you as a person and not just your work. Because the thing is, like a lot of students now have really strong portfolios, so you kind of have to connect beyond the portfolio. And I think you do that by having a really strong About Me section and also showing what it is that you're passionate about and what drives you to work and learn outside of the assignments. And yeah, I think that's mainly what I have about that's mainly what I think I have. I think that is all that I have to say about this portfolio. Again, it's pretty good. I think it can be developed over time. It is a student portfolio, but it's looking really good. They've got some good foundation. I think it's mainly just sort of reorganizing things and just adding a little bit more. And also, I hope they know that they can still go back to these projects and just making sure. I hope that, one thing is to save your files and always work on it a little bit after the assignment, just because sometimes like with the deadlines of school, you kind of like finish it. You get so locked into it, just working on it for like weeks and weeks, and then you just forget about it. But I think it's nice. There's something nice about once you've done that and you've gotten the main part done, to just kind of take a little break from it for like a couple weeks and then come back, see it with a fresh eye, and then add in the things that you could have done if you had like a little bit more time, or just things that you've thought of like later, or from seeing everybody else's projects who've done things that you've liked, you can kind of sort of add in those. So just because the assignment's turned in doesn't mean that you can't work on it anymore, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think that concludes my feedback. Hopefully it helps someone. I have a couple more portfolios that I'm going to do, but I think I'm going to do those a little separate. And yeah, if you have a portfolio that you would like to be reviewed, feel free to reach out and send it to me and I'll review one for you. But anyways, hope it's helpful. Thank you. Until next time, catch you later. Bye.